So let's get started. So there are a lot of events that have happened in just a few short days here, right? We've got the drop of the new Tesla bot demo that happened. There was news, I think, pretty valid news or strong likelihood that Dojo is now in production. We have changes to Tom Ju's role. There's a visit to Argentina. And there's some comments by Elon about Tesla Bot just a few minutes ago saying that, Smokeway had this post saying that he thinks that he will have 10,000 bots by next year. Then you'll have, a million bots by 2027 and maybe a billion bots by 2030. And Elon replies saying, that's a little bit too fast, but not that far wrong. And then we also have Elon confirming that you're going to have summon and actual smart summon and banish is going to be coming soon. Just great progress. Saying that that pretty soon your Tesla will take you to your destination and then it's going to park automatically unless you ask it otherwise. So why don't we start with you, Jeff? Which of these topics do you want to start with?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. You can hit Argentina really quick. I didn't know, did he announce a trip there? I don't know if he announced a trip, but they've certainly missed that. But they certainly met a couple times in the last few weeks, and I definitely think they're cooking something up. And the fact that you don't see movement on Mexico for me is also a bit telling. Just from my experience, I've set up manufacturing in Argentina before, a couple times actually, and also Brazil. And it just this seems like a place where global EV adoption, there's opportunity. There's huge opportunity. There's 50 million people in Argentina, like 220 million in Brazil. When you manufacture in Argentina, you've got great export lanes to, obviously internal, but also to Brazil, Colombia, and so forth. And just so people understand, like if you don't manufacture in Argentina, depending on the product, it could be 30-50% duties or more. And they're a pretty industrious base, but obviously there's been monetary and currency issues. So there's things that have to get resolved. And I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but I would like to see Tesla, one of the things that is just commonly misunderstood is the lack of global, EV penetration. Like if you compare it to the smartphone business, smartphones are in, greater than 150 countries. They're everywhere. The network infrastructure is everywhere. They're everywhere. But it wasn't always like that. In the first, couple of years, we're doing 30, 70, 100 million a year between iOS and Android. And, that is now ramped, to 30, 10 to 30x that. Now it's, 1.2 to 1.5 billion. And, China came in and swept up a lot of that volume, by the way. And it would be one of my concerns too, if Tesla doesn't, really drive this global penetration, China will soak up a lot of this volume. BYD is, has a presence in Brazil. I know they're setting up manufacturing. They're doing a lot of exports as well. So I'd love to see Tesla get into South America and drive EV adoption, drive clean energy, mega packs, and I'd love to see that.
But you actually think that it has something to do with Giga Mexico, that could be one reason why they're slowed that down, which I don't see the connection, but you think that there's a chance that Giga Argentina will somehow take over from Mexico? Really?
Yeah,
Really?
there's export lane overlap between the two countries. So there is some favorability and there's some geographical favorability for building in Mexico and distributing in South America, but they don't have in terms of duty structure, they don't have the same advantages that building in Argentina or building in Brazil would be for Argentina and Brazil. So there's definite advantage for either manufacturing in Brazil or Argentina. And I think if you do Argentina, I think you get the best of both worlds for both Brazil and Argentina. But I'd have to look double click a little bit more on the auto side for that. But I believe so. And again, otherwise, if you don't do this, they're just seeing it to to China from an EV perspective, and there could be a lot of volume down there. The other thing you got to do to be successful down there, and we were like we're doing smartphones, we were number 2 for a decade, and the one of the things you have to do to be successful is to have a good low to mid tier product, but with a lot of features. Like people feel like they're getting everything, but they don't have to spend $120,000 to get it. And there is a market for that, by the way, down there too. But in general, you've got to get the low to mid tier nailed. And I think Tesla, with the $25,000 car, they could definitely do that.
And then you did point out that Elon did today sent out a post saying that you should invest. I encourage you to invest in Argentina, and you said he's not going to do that unless he himself has invested in Argentina first. A small little nugget, right?
Yeah, why is he encouraging people to do it? Unless it's not right. Unless it's not right for Tesla, if there's some issue. I think again, they didn't have to meet again, but they did. So anyway, there's something going on there.
All right, let's talk Tesla bot. So that was a rumor. We still don't know what's happening with Argentina, but the bot, that was a demo dropped this weekend. Very impressive demo in the sense that they showed you 12. We counted 12 bots in the lab. They all look like they're Gen 2 as well. So that is a very good sign that we're heading that direction. They showed a pick and place of the 4680 batteries into very specific little slots and a tray. That wasn't as impressive, but it was just showing that precision matters. And they confirm that there's now going to be 2 Tesla bots. There are already 2 Tesla bots in an actual Tesla factory doing actual testing in the workplace. It's not yet useful work, not being used for that job yet, but I think they said by the end of this year that's what Elon was saying that's going to happen. So that was great. I want to hear your thoughts on how impressive that was. And then just this morning, just a few hours ago, I guess, Smokeaway did this tweet and post saying this is his estimate for Optimus production ramp. Like this year, 1,000 bots. Next year, 2025, 10,000 bots. And then 1 million by 2027, and then 1 billion by 2030. Elon replied to that saying, not quite that fast, but not far wrong. So, in the other interviews I've had with other CEOs of the other humanoid bot companies, they also have agreed in that sense that, it's going to be like a 10x each year. So if you do think that maybe this year, a bot company will make 1,000, it does make sense that the next year will be 10,000, then 100,000 and onwards. And this is the ramp that Smokeaway had used. So I think in many ways it's a lot faster than many of us thought. To have I don't know if he meant to say that he won't have 1,000 bots this year, but that is not likely, right? Because he did say also that the Optimus's hands is going to get to 22 degrees of freedom. Currently, these Optimus hands are 11 degrees of freedom. So that means that it's not design locked yet. So Jeff, oh, great. There's Scott. Scott. Thank you, Scott. Oh my God. Scott Walter, 2-time robotics founder. Are you there, Scott? I'm inviting him. I was just about to text him and message him, and then he might have read my mind.
You never say, "Oh my God," when you see me or Xander.
What's that?
You never say, "Oh my God," when you see Xander.
Right?
It's because he read my mind. I was literally trying to message him right now, get here now, because we're going to talk bots. So yeah, I'm not going to ask either of you guys. I'll ask you after I ask Scott, because he's the one that matters. Scott, what did you think about the Optimus production ramp, Smokeaway, and the comment by Elon? I was just saying that if the hands are going to be new 22-degree freedom hands by the end of this year, it's not going to be design locked. They're not going to make 1,000 yet, right? What's your interpretation?
Okay, well, the only reason I joined it because Xander said that Jeff was dropping some truth bombs about Argentina, and I had to come in and listen to that. But anyway, yeah, that was a rather interesting post. And now let's look at the numbers that they seem reasonable. It's like, oh, you could expect maybe 1,000 this year, right? And if you're able to do a 10x multiple, well, you get to 1 billion in 2030, which is a nutty number. And Elon's reply was like, what, not far off. Now think about it. Usually Elon talks about like 1 or 2 orders of magnitude. So let's say, okay, 2 orders of magnitude. That's still 10 million bots by 2030. And if you still think that's too aggressive, yeah, divide it by 10 again. You still get 1 million bots by 2030. I don't think Elon is going to say something like that when he thinks someone is off by 3 orders of magnitude. Even then, what is Tesla going to do with 1 million bots? I mean, how many people work at Tesla? Well, nowadays, maybe not that many, but you don't have 1 million people working there. So that means they're going to have excess supply, and that's going to go somewhere. And that means the bots that they are designing for the factories, either they're looking to go into other people's factories, which is a possibility, or as Warren keeps on saying, they're going for the home market. Now, in order to go for the home market, you need a 22-degree freedom hand. Why? Because it's very much like a human hand.
Can I make a couple of comments to add to what Scott was saying? They could absolutely build 1,000 pre-design lock, just to be clear. Like,
What? Jeff, okay, thank you, because you've been telling me that they're not going to build numbers until design lock, and that's what we're waiting for. Now you're
but
saying
that's
that they
not mass
could.
production over 1,000 bots.
Nice.
Is
Okay.
not mass production. Like they're going to need to build to me, like in my experience, like they're going to need to build more than 1,000, quite frankly, to get it to like final design lock. Like they're going to have to get the reliability test. There's some of these bots are going to get trashed. They're going to be taken to your reliability test to failure, hyperextension. There's just a number of things that could be done to these things, in the prototyping process. So yeah, and then I was going to ask Scott, like, if the hands is kind of the last major feature change on the bot, couldn't they, could they hot swap those, down the road? Like, could they get the hands in and swap them in, or is there just too many controls from the hands all the way up into the main control unit to do that?
I have been giving that like a lot of thought and what's going on with the hands, because it's not just a 22 freedom hand that you're going to swap out for the one that's there. Elon talked about moving stuff into the forearm, which means they're completely redesigning the forearm and the wrist. And I'm trying to count the 22 degrees of freedom. And I thought the 22 degrees of freedom did not count the wrist, because normally it doesn't. The 11-degree freedom hand does not count the wrist. The only way I can get to 22 degrees of freedom is you actually have to count the wrist in there, which means it's an integrated solution. They are not designing a hand, they are designing a lower arm, a very different lower arm. And if you're going to bother to design a lower arm, you're going to bother to design the upper arm to go with it, which means you're going to change the shoulder joint to be the ball and socket joint that I've been wanting them to do all along. And if you can figure out how to do a ball and socket joint in the upper arm, you can also do it down in your hip, which means the whole hip is going to change. And remember, feet are basically hands on the ground. So maybe you can start to come up with some fancy feet, and then maybe you start changing the torso. I think we're going to see a Gen 3 robot by the end of the year.
I see.
And
Okay.
and it's going to be like Cybertruck. It's like, FSD doesn't work. So as soon as you change the hands, the training data, you may as well throw it anyways. If you're going to throw the training data out, then just do the whole thing. Elon basically, he in a way, he may have revealed more than he thought, because it just doesn't make sense that you do something like that and then freeze everything else, unless they're going for like a version 2.5. But I think there's something major going on there. That's kind of my read of it, and I'm going to stick my neck out and say that that's what's going to go on. They're obviously going to continue to figure out how to train these bots to understand that process, what's going on, what works, what doesn't work. So when the next generation bot comes out, they actually know how to train it, how much teleoperation you need to do, how much simulation. So it's not like they're throwing everything out with it. There may be some stuff they can move over. And there's also the possibility they may be looking at almost 2 designs, like the one which is just the rugged factory version that only needs 11 DOF hands, that they can already start to implement and start, knocking margins down, stuff like that, and giving their sub-suppliers, and the one that they're really looking at that's going to sell. Because if Elon is saying, oh yeah, we're going to have, 10 to 100 million bots by 2030, that's starting to go into houses, you know, which means you need a very different design than the one that they have now.
I think if you could, and we should get the Warren's hand in a minute. I was just going to say, that is a question. Like, will there be multiple tiers of bots? And I would think if you could get like greater than 50% differential in the manufacturing cost, there may be some value in doing that. But I don't know if you just get there with less controls in the wrist and the hand. I'd have to sit down with you and kind of go through cost assumptions on that.
Right. I think they can do a lot. And I think there's a major pivot going on here, because remember when they designed the hand, everyone was doing it around the principle of the best part is no part, the best skew is no skew. So they took out a knuckle from each finger. They made all the fingers the same length. And now they're going to 22 degrees of freedom. Oh, we're throwing a knuckle, so we can add more knuckles now. And it's going to be more human-like and all this other stuff. And it tells me each finger is going to be different. It's going to be like a human hand. You're going to have a pinky with the same length and the same diameter and everything else. So it seems like if they're doing that, they're thinking that maybe we've really oversimplified, and they're going to take and start adding a bit more features throughout the entire body. And part of it, I think, hinges down to, I think they came up with a breakthrough in actuator design. Because with those 22 degrees of freedom, they have 6 actuators right now. They have to add some. How many are they going to add? 1, 2? How many? And if they're adding a lot of actuators, there's not that much room in the forearm, especially when the forearm's already taken up by that big bulky wrist when you have those 2 actuators. I think they've came up with a better way to articulate the wrist with smaller actuators, and they figured out some other way to get the tension control with much smaller, more compact actuators. So I have a feeling there's a lot going on in the background that we're not seeing. So if you start pulling it apart, you definitely see that, oh, they've got something going on.
So I just want to say that I oppose Jeff's plan to use Optimus as a crash test dummy, because you could get a volume of Optimus going if you used them in the crash test, but I think that's probably not the right plan. I know that he didn't say it exactly, but I'm pretty sure that's what he meant. So,
no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant.
I was joking.
I meant, yeah, no, you have reliability testing on the bot itself, not for the vehicle. Yeah.
Oh, that's torture, Jeff. Torture.
Damn it. So I think that there's cross purposes, and there's something I think Scott said that troubles me. And I'm not saying he's wrong, it just troubles me. I think they have to get to a point where they have a bot they feel they can manufacture in volume that will be somewhat useful. And that might be the Gen 3 bot. It might wait till a Gen 4 bot. I think as long as you're making really, really dramatic improvements, and you see that, okay, we've got our Gen 3, but if we this, and this, we're going to get like really, really dramatic improvements on a Gen 4. So let's not manufacture at scale yet. I don't know when they make the decision, okay, let's make a whole bunch of these, but I think there's a value and this is what Scott said that bothered me. There's a value in mass producing, and what mass production might be, I don't know, 10,000 or 100,000 units, a large number of bots, so that you can start generating real world data, so that you can start developing the real world artificial intelligence that you're trying to get to. But Scott, you have the opinion that if they have a Gen 3 bot and they train on that data, that the Gen 4 bot won't be able to operate on the data from the Gen 3 bot?
It could be harder, or maybe they solve that problem, because right now we see they can't take FSD from the Sexies over to the Cybertruck. So there is some differential going on there. And remember, it's photons in and joints out. And if your joints are completely different, like your hands are now going to have more actuators, and the responsiveness and the movement types, everything is completely different. So that almost means like everything that you were training in the first one, you're going to have to figure out how to map that in some way. And then you want to be able to extend it to take care of those new capabilities. So I think there will be some crossover, but there's still going to be some new training. So we have to know, why is the Cybertruck not on FSD? What's the limiting factor there?
What I was told is that Cybertruck has, it's not because of the different height and all that, it's because it has rear wheel steering. And so when it's trying to turn, it turns differently than all other cars. And then you just saw the main developer in charge of the Optimus team saying this weekend, he said that what they're working on is bot-to-bot variants and transfer of intelligence amongst fleet And so that is why you're going to go to 1,000 bots, right? So that you can actually see
Yes,
all these
yes.
tiny little variances amongst each, even though you're identical bots. So at that point, even if you have a 22-degree hand versus an 11-degree hand, it will learn those variances and then be able to adapt, right?
Well, it may be more of like the variance from identical bots, because identical bots are never identical. So there's a little bit of calibration. Whether they can handle the variance from 11 to 22 degree freedom, hopefully that's just a math problem, but it could be a little bit more than that to be able to solve it. And I think by the time they get to the Gen 4 bot, they may have it down so well that it's really easy to start training these new data sets. So I mean, and Warren, I'm in agreement with you that the idea of training these bots the way they did FSD, by having the bot follow you around the house to learn everything and to have kind of a beta program like that, just keeps on making more and more sense to me. So again, you could get some limited production of something that's close to it, but still they didn't stop producing the 12-volt architecture now that they have the 48-volt in the Cybertruck. The Tesla is able to manufacture more than one product at a time. And so it may be that they're happy to stick with the Gen 2 bot right now for certain purposes. And then they will just basically at one point say, okay, it's deprecated, we're moving over to this new architecture. And that's what we're going to start using forward. So I don't think it necessarily means that they stopped. It means they're iterating really quickly. And they definitely have, a Gen 3 on the drawing board and maybe even a Gen 4.
I wanted to add two more markets that are friendly markets. One is the other Tesla companies, for example, SpaceX. It'd be really interesting to see how the Tesla bot could help the Boring Company, especially with the changeover as they're going through different materials and so forth. I know there's a lot of issues there. And then a third are sister companies like Redwood Materials. I could see it being a great asset in the warehouse and other use cases that could come out for the bot that would be helpful from a data standpoint, but still be within the general Tesla family.
Yeah, and then the sub-suppliers is the next area you could go to. But even then, as you go down the whole supply chain, Jeff can probably answer this. Is in effect how many people are working on products that end up in Teslas when you go down that whole supply chain, and that kind of gives you maybe the limit that you could potentially replace just in the Tesla supply chain. And is that 1 million as like the maximum number, or is it a less? And if it's less, is it a lot less?
It's a lot. I mean, it's a huge number of people. And I mean, it's relative to the volume you're doing and the number of SKUs that you're doing. But I mean, you would be astounded. I mean, go through I should look through my notes. I have it just in terms of the total part numbers, that are made, and then you'd have to go through what types of parts are these and what's the content. But I could actually see a world where once Tesla has this bot ramped up and highly functional, that they go to their suppliers and they would be putting this in as suppliers, because remember, there's Tesla people at suppliers already, and they're working on industrialization issues. So they're working on how to get velocity higher, yield higher, and cost lower. But a huge portion of that equation, there's two huge portions of that equation. One is the labor efficiency of that operation, and two is the capital efficiency. And Tesla has a gigantic sensitivity to both of these. I hear it, when they talk about component costs, and in just my experience, they have a huge sensitivity to both of those variables, and they can't stand when the kind of the conversion cost to make raw material into the final piece part, is kind of out of whack. So I could see them doing that, and that really just upends the cost structure to make anything. And this could be a whole different show, but yeah, there's not going to be a problem. Like, where do you put something like this? There's not going to be a problem. It's just going to be like, where does it start? And then and then like I said, it's going to start in the I think it's going to start in the perimeters of the factories and move its way in. But there's not going to be an issue of like, where would I put this thing? There's going to be so many places to put them. It's going to be unbelievable.
I want to talk to you, Warren and Scott, about your comment about going to consumer. So if we agree that the trajectory is likely going to be 1,000 bots this year, 10,000 next year, 100,000 2026, right? It seems to me that it's all of that's going to be used in a factory, not consumers. Having said that, I don't know, Warren, if you saw the interview Scott and I had with Bernd Bornick, founder of 1X, and when you look at their bot, you kind of laugh at it because it looks like a Wall-E, it looks like this stuffed toy, but there was a reason. He explained why they designed it that way. It is 100% going to go to the consumer. And he said this, he goes, I've never seen a revolutionary product ever succeed that did not start in consumer first and then trickle down to enterprise, as opposed to something you launch in enterprise and then trickle down to consumer. But to design it for the home is very different. I don't know if you watch that video, you'll hear him explain in just minute details about, like, for example, the elbow, that the weight of the bot needs to be less than 60 pounds because he can't hurt people. It doesn't actually have actuators. It's got tendons because they don't want to have metal parts, and it's got to cost a lot cheaper, a lot more affordable for it to sell to a consumer rather than you would sell to an enterprise. That's why I just don't see that happening. But you're slowly convincing Scott, and so I'm like, no, it's not happening. So tell me why you think it's going to go consumer play first.
I don't understand this fear about having the bot in the consumer market and it's going to injure people. We buy ATVs. I mean, we're buying 4-wheel and 3-wheel ATVs, and people get injured all the time with the toys that they buy. The odds of the bot is going to cause far less damage than ATVs cause in society. You're really going to have to go out of your way to get a bot to hurt you. It's going to be trained to not hurt you. I think there's this paranoid fantasy that the bots are going to suddenly become Terminators, or they're going to become Inspector Clouseaus, and they're going to start falling on everybody. I don't know where this fear is coming from. I do agree with Scott and others that the more obvious path from a profitability standpoint would be selling to business and having them do tasks. But I think the key distinction that I think Scott is coming around to, or maybe already agrees with, is the real goal is a generalized human robot with generalized intelligence. People have this idea that the goal of the bot is, hey, look, there's all these tasks. Let's train it to do all these tasks one task at a time. Hey, let's train it to sort batteries. Okay, great. We've trained it to do that one task. All right, how many more tasks do we need to train it to do? Millions? Okay, well, how long is it going to take to train the bot to do millions of tasks if you got to train it to do each one? What if you trained the bot so well in terms of generalized intelligence that you said, hey, go do that thing you've never done before. Go do this. It's never done it before. And it tries to do something it's never done before. It evaluates itself. How well did I do? Uploads the data around the mistake moments, the moments that it wants to train to do better. That goes up to the ridiculously large supercomputer training cloud that's now exists with Dojo and H400 GPUs or whatever the hell exists at the time. And it experiences the world, and it learns to understand the world. And if we told you, Herbert, hey, go sort these batteries, and we gave you instructions on how to sort the batteries, and we didn't show you another human sorting the batteries, but we just said, here's what I want you to do, here's the task I want you would probably do better than Optimus is doing now, right? Because you are you are a humanoid body with generalized intelligence. So if they can train the bot to get to the level of a 4-year-old human, then an 8-year-old human, in being able to do tasks without having been trained to do them, but just having a general understanding of the world and a general understanding of language that's going to come with Grok and XAI, that is far more important than training it to do this task, then that task, then that task, then that task. And I think that having bots in the hands of ordinary customers like us who are going to say, hey, let's go country line dancing. Let's teach it to country line dance. Right. And you don't have specific instructions for country line dancing, right? You know, it's sort of like, okay, there's some training that the teacher does at the class and you try to emulate what everybody else is doing, but it's not, you know, some of the things that we do don't have perfection in mind. Right? They're not, it's not like there's a perfect way of doing them. So I think there's a lot of, and I'm not saying that country line dancing is a useful task, but the point is that I can drop any one of you guys into a country line dancing room and you'll look like shit, but you'll make some progress in learning the easy dances. Right. And that's the value. The value is creating a generalized intelligence and a generalized humanoid bot.
Herbert, did you clip the part where Warren said, I agree with Scott?
No, I'm not going to do that. And
Okay. But
I also
no,
clipped the part where he goes, I don't
yeah,
think Scott is right. So yeah.
yeah, okay. That part you can delete. No, the see, I've always felt, you know, and it just makes logical sense. You start in the factory because the environment is a very constrained environment. It's controlled. You don't have to worry about anything else. There's like a lot of money that makes that would be going on in there. But Warren does state a good case of the idea of you want to make it a generalist. You want to do a little bit of CrossFit training here. So why not do something like that? And if it's worked well with FSD, I could see that happening. Now, it doesn't mean they're exclusive of one another. It doesn't mean that it's going to go, it's not going to go in the factory. It's just going to go home and vice versa. It means you might want to do that. And let's say Warren can also point to the fact that in the Optimus video, we were seeing it, you know, folding laundry and putting shampoo bottles in cubby holes. So I can't remember the last time I did a factory tour, you know, in Giga, Texas, and I went through there. And Warren, do you remember the part where there's the laundry folding stations in Giga, Texas, and the cubby holes with shampoo bottles?
Yeah.
I'm surprised we don't have Optimus shower porn yet.
Don't fall for it, Scott. Do not fall for it. He's very convincing.
So
Warren's convincing, but
yeah, I know, but it you know, yeah, that's the thing is, you know, he does, it does make sense that it's not a wacky idea. And so it should definitely be considered and kind of put in there. I still think the focus is going to be in the factory, but you know, the 22-degree of freedom hand and some of the stuff that we're seeing or the activities that they're learning, it's like, this is going beyond just wanting to be in the factory.
I want to touch on 2 points. One, Herbert mentioned, and just slight pushback in that there are a lot of employees across Tesla and other Tesla friendly companies that the bot can be in and get a whole bunch of data in different use cases. So from that standpoint, I think there's a lot of data they can get from the homes easily. And then a little bit I want to push back on Warren, and it's just that there's a trip hazard. And in a home, in a kitchen, what have you, a dog, whatever it may be, the Tesla bot could trip and fall into a kid or something like that. So there is some additional level of risk in a home versus in a factory.
okay.
And I think to come to Warren's defense, that's where you learn about the trip hazards. And the other thing is that if you send them to employees' homes, you're doing it for free. If it's going to Warren, Tesla is getting like $10,000 or $20,000 a year to train Optimus. So that's the other reason, is that you can actually get people to pay you for the training data.
Yeah, and Thai children, and you know, if it falls on a Thai children or an elderly Thai person, the liability lawsuits in Thailand aren't as damaging to the company's bottom line, and you know, people aren't as valuable here.
Where is okay? I'm gonna change the topic quick. So let's move on to, I think, the biggest news that no one's talking about. I don't know, did you guys hear that Dojo is in production? This came from a very, veritable source. This is TSMC had a conference and they said that Dojo's training tile is now in production. And in the future, it could be 40 times faster than the current systems that we have today. This is a kind of a brand new way to build a system on a wafer processor, and it's now ready for mass production. And it's on track to be deployed shortly. This is news that's on top of this rumor. I think it's still a rumor, but confirmed by some NVIDIA employees that Tesla bought 100,000 H200s. These are much more powerful, and I think they have higher memory than the H100s. And so this takes Tesla's compute power to likely 400 exaflops at this point. And then, of course, they have already announced the $500 million Dojo supercomputer data center that's coming to New York. And then apparently also that there is a different kind, what is it? A new 100 megawatt data center that's going to train self-driving AI at Giga Texas. That's going to be using the NVIDIA hardware. So lots of movement in AI. Elon did say, what, 3 weeks ago, said that, Tesla is actually number 2 after Meta, and XAI would be number 3 in terms of most compute power. I don't know if he was referring to most purchase from NVIDIA, but most. So did you guys hear about this? Isn't this a massive, big news? And yet, few people are talking about it. So let's talk about
I
it.
thought, is this what we heard last week, or is this something today?
No, it was a May 1st that came out, but why did I talk about it today? Because I think something happened today that validated it.
Well, if I can just follow on what Herbert said, I think one of the important things that you mentioned was that it was a 100 megawatt data center. And I've seen Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg, and I think I don't know if it was Jan LeCun, somebody else was talking about one of the challenges of building up your training compute is it starts to get hard, and maybe Jeff knows more about this. It starts to get hard to build a data center when you start increasing your power requirements because you just can't get the power. And so I'm not a fan of building businesses in New York because I'm from New York and I think the government is borderline communist, but they are very big on corporate welfare. And I believe it's in Buffalo or near Buffalo, and it's got reasonably easy access to Ontario's hydropower generation, which is, one of the Quebec Hydro and Ontario Hydro generate a tremendous amount of electricity. So I think something that Elon has mentioned and we need to be aware of is and the people who are at the top of this are aware of it is getting enough power for these larger data centers is going to be a huge issue because they don't want to stop at 100 megawatts. They want to go to 200 megawatts, 400 megawatts, a gigawatt, and so on. Eventually they want to have a Dyson sphere around the sun, probably. But Jeff, do you have any comments on the challenge of building these data centers and getting the electricity in?
Well, I mean, it's clearly one of the bottlenecks after transformers that still are being worked through. I think this year and into the most part of next year. So I think energy storage is going to play a big role with this, and this goes into all their planning. This is what makes this whole thing complex because when you're buying H100s or 200s, what you want to do, just like you want a very quick cash conversion cycle when you're buying components to make cars, when you're buying components to make data centers, you want the fastest possible route to install them, bring them live, and have them, generating revenue. And then when you have these bottlenecks in there, that creates a huge problem that ties up your cash then, and that keeps you from buying more silicon. So NVIDIA is invested in this. There's a number of people that are kind of looking downstream at these and how do we deal with these bottlenecks. It's not fully resolved. It's a big problem. But and then getting back to kind of the point, I mean, this, and I think Eddie's in the audience, he brought this up too, just Herbert, this $10 billion of compute spend, Tesla pledged, all the other hyperscalers are raising their spend this year, and they're saying that they're going to spend more next year than they are in 2024. So here is my read on this, and based on my experience and on and actually being in the procurement loop for silicon and sorts, I think Tesla is not going to say jack shit about Dojo 1.5 silicon anything. They need to secure supply of the H100s and H200s. They want to be first in line. They want to bring the H200s are like 30 times more powerful than the H100s. So you want to bring those, and they're roughly the same price point. So they'd want to bring those up and they want to be, as close to first in line as possible. And what you don't want to do is when you're trying to be first in line, you don't want to, you want to puff your chest out and say, oh, by the way, I'm competing with you. So I think they're going to keep this is on the down low, as much on the down low as possible. Whoever from TSMC is like blabbing about this stuff, I'm sure that wasn't highly appreciated. And this kind of stuff happens, and they've got to deal with it. But I think it's huge news. The question is my theory correct? Is Tesla basically being quiet about this and like this thing's going, it's happening? Pete Bannon's running the team. He's got the experience. He did the inference chip. He did the inference side. Tesla's spending a shitload of money on inference. Elon made the reference, of everything going in the vehicle and other places, which I'm assuming is bought. Who else? Who knows? Maybe other things that they're thinking about too. So this 10 billion of spend is gigantic. This Dojo in production is gigantic, and I think what Tesla's looking at is this is kind of like a relief valve for them. If it works, then it gives them leverage with NVIDIA. It gives them supply when others don't have it. If it's truly less power consumption, truly better in size, then it's going to give them advantage on the the data center build out. But it'd be interesting to see like what their long term plan is. Like, what is the 3 to 5 year plan with doing the silicon?
Hey, if the space
I'll pause
drops, Herbert is having connection issues. Just FYI,
Scott?
We'll run it back.
Yeah. Basically, I was just going to ask Warren, since he's from New York, if he remembers what's the name of the hydropower station at the base of Niagara Falls. I can't remember the name of the guy who designed that thing. What was his name?
I'm afraid I don't remember that. Sorry.
You don't remember? It begins with a T. I think his first name was like
Nikola. Yeah, like Nikola Tesla, something like that.
Nikola Tesla. Yeah.
So, and I think Tesla is not going to pull out the trumpet and start playing until they're in a good place with NVIDIA and a good place with their own solution. But by the way, NVIDIA knows what's going on. They know everything that's going on in TSMC. There's such a huge portion of TSMC, so they there's a lot of industry intelligence of what's going on. I just don't think, again, Tesla wants to play it up, until they get some stability. Anyway, we should need like the nuclear codes to like end of space. It should be like 2 people have to press the button at the same time, or
Exactly. I see Scott. I don't see Warren yet.
That's fine.
Hi guys.
I mean,
I've got a question for you. This is David in Thailand, Chiang Mai, Thailand. Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a question regarding licensing FSD. Do you think one of the stipulations that Elon's making, that if you want to license FSD, like Ford or GM, that it has to be for their electric vehicles, or do you think it can be ICE, hybrid, and all other vehicles?
Yeah, let's go do a panel thing. I do not think it's going to be for gas cars, and I don't think it's going to be hybrid either. Just going to be EVs. What do you guys think? Let's go down the panel here. Jeff, Xander, Warren, Scott, and Emmett.
I don't know, actually. It depends how. I think from a power consumption perspective, I guess it depends on where the final solution is at. If it's net saving lives, here's a question. I don't know if you get the same kind of controls you can get, with a mechanical axle with an EV versus just a standard ICE. So I don't know. It may be too difficult to train. So yeah, I would lean towards BEV only, but I wouldn't eliminate. I don't think it's impossible to say it couldn't be on gas cars.
Yeah, I think that's one of the questions, maybe on a conference call, but one of these analysts should ask him.
I don't think that's a question that shareholders care that much about, and I think that Tesla's mission is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy and enabling gasoline cars to improve them would be the opposite of the mission of the company. And I think, the goal is to end ICE and as Jeff pointed out, BEVs will be better. But hello to Chiang Mai from Bangkok.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I think I agree with Warren on those points, that it goes back to Tesla's mission and whether they want to actually enable that. From a technical standpoint, you probably could get it to work in a nice vehicle. I don't know how difficult it would be, like Jeff pointed out. But the other thing Jeff pointed out is that if it's demonstrably saving lives, then you have that conundrum of like, okay, save lives or, transition to EVs. And so it almost becomes, I guess, the classic trolley problem there in a way.
Yeah, but a gas car continues to pollute the air and kills people through airborne pollution.
Yeah, exactly. So you could look at it from that way and say, no, we're not going to do it with a gas car. But if gas cars are still killing 100,000 people a year, then you have to think about, well, where do we put them on there? But I would say that they want to keep it on BEV for as long as they can, and hopefully never have to do it over to a gas powered vehicle, and hopefully not even a hybrid.
Let's be clear. I don't think we're talking about putting FSD on existing cars that are on the road, gas cars that are on the road, but rather partnering with someone like Ford or whoever to redesign their gas vehicles to enable FSD. And I just don't think that that Tesla's plan is by 2030, pretty much everyone's going to stop making ICE vehicles. So why enable that to continue? And it's not, so if there's 100,000 gas car deaths on the road, a million new, there's 2 billion vehicles in the global fleet, 10 million new EVs is a very small chunk of the actual deaths. 10 million new gas cars is a very, very small percentage of the total deaths. So you're not really stopping 100,000 deaths, you're stopping 100 deaths. And if you shift the transition to EV faster, you're also saving lives from air pollution fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Herbert, I was just going to say, guys, Herbert, are we done with your news flow? I thought you went through Argentina, we went through Dojo. I thought there's a number of topics.
I've got a few more. Yep. Okay. Once I think we finished answering David's question, we can move on to the next one. But it actually flows quite nicely because we're talking about FSD now. So, how much we got some news here. So, right, Omar kind of calculated that we now likely have crossed 1.5 billion FSD miles and will hit 2 billion before the annual meeting, which is in June. And by next month, getting to 1 billion took 3 years. Getting to 2 billion FSD miles will take less than 3 months. And then, it was wonderful what he said, that he estimates that FSD, supervised FSD, is now preventing 7 crashes per day on net. And Sawyer said that's 1 life saved every week. Omar says it's actually 1.35. And then you've got Elon saying that soon your Tesla will take you to your destination and park automatically unless you ask for it. And then Steve Mark Ryan says that's the last piece of the puzzle. Elon replied back to him saying, actual smart summon and banish with no one in the cars coming soon. And then he also responded to this comment from, Bill Gurley and Bill Gerstner talking about how there's so much data now, but so much compute, but they actually use only a small amount of that data, the data that really matters. And Elon said that only about 1 mile out of 10,000 miles, 1 mile out of 10,000 miles of distance driving is useful for training. The limiting factor used to be for FSD progress was AI training compute, but now it's validation as the interventions are so rare. So this is moving fast. What do you guys think about the progress? I think we're all expecting that at some point we're going to hear about 12.4 coming out. I mean, we're getting close to 8.8, which somebody told me, Alexandra said it's 100 days away. It's probably less than that now. What's your guys' thoughts about the progress about FSD? Who wants to start?
I think banish mode is really significant. One of the reasons I've been really excited about this fast pace of progress with FSD since 12.3 dropped is we're actually at that point where you get in your car and say, hey, go here, and it'll take you there. And they're really close. And then once you get there, you get out of the car and the car parks itself. that is a massive value that can enrich a lot of people's lives, especially if you live somewhere where you might have to drive around for 5 to 15 minutes because you went to the city for whatever reason, and finding a parking space can be a pain. That's huge. I think it's going to be very, very significant. And if the price is great right now, but if they had that level of features and were willing to drop the price or play with the pricing a little bit, I think they could get over 50% adoption pretty easily.
I would just say that the people are focusing a lot on, my car drives great today or my car drove like crap today. And I think the big thing that stands out is the rate of updates that we're seeing a rapid up because if you're an old OG FSD beta tester, it was like, I don't know, 2-3 months for an update. And now it seems like it feels like it's once. I mean, I'm not in the US, so I'm not getting any updates. My kid has the car and I don't know whether she's getting updates or not. I don't pay attention, but I think the updates are now like once a week. And they seem to be rolling out much, much faster. And my impression is that the improvements are bigger than they were in the past. So you're getting more improvement in 1 week than you were getting in 2 months. And I think, there was that Stephen Mark Ryan cut of a Bill Gurley and Brad Gerstner podcast, the BG2 podcast. I watched that again, and I think their in-depth discussion of what's going on with FSD is really important for people to understand. I actually, I'm going to be apparently part of a panel discussion with Dan O'Dowd and Adrian and Metaphor about FSD, and I'm sure Dan won't watch it, but I, suggested that everybody watch that video, just that people have a common understanding of what FSD is and what the problem is. But I think that, rapid updates and larger updates are important.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to the first build that that they built with unconstrained compute. I mean, I think we're on point releases. It'd be interesting for Tesla to help us understand like what are point releases bug fixes, like manual bug fixes, or are point releases brand new training models that are being run. It'd be interesting to understand from Tesla, when is that first build with unconstrained compute, and when would we be able to experience that? Is that 12.4? Is that 12.5? I think it would be interesting to understand that. Yeah, the pace of progress is key. The number of releases is interesting. It's an iterative approach to software. It's some people like it, some people don't like it. But if you can get releases out rapidly and they're bug free and improving, that says that there's a pretty significant level of stability with the platform, and it actually helps you get to a final product faster if you can put them out and still be stable, release to release, where you're not breaking more stuff than you fix and not adding higher severity issues and trading them for lower severity issues. So anyway, yeah, I think the FSD progress is exciting. I wish Tesla for earnings would have put out a survey. I think earnings was either the second or the third week of the free trial. And I wish they would have put out a survey, say, hey, you've been using this for 10 days or 3 weeks. Do you plan on purchasing it after the free trial is done? Yes or no? And I think that would be interesting information to understand. And then this is a really important week. I mean, maybe they would tell us if it's really good news or not, but the free trial, I think, is over. So
Right.
what happened after the
I
free trial?
suspect that after the free trial, it's going to be less people doing it. But I think that when they roll out Smart Summon and Banish, that is, to me, and tell me if you guys think I'm wrong, if you guys don't agree with this, but I think that those two features is what has the best chance of making FSD go viral. get that chat GPT moment when people see it drop me off in front of Target, and then the car by itself finds a parking spot. People are going to watch this car drive without a driver, and vice versa. And that is the feature that I think many people might pay $99 a month for. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I would be sweating. Like if I pulled up to Target, got out of my car, and like I'm on the first release, I would be probably walking in the Target sweating like a whore in shirt. I mean, I would be really concerned that my car would like run into something or do something weird. But anyway, but I'm, it's going to be amazing. Like when that's actually bug free and works, 100,000 times in a row without a defect, right? Because they're going to have to get to that level. You think about it, you may have 1 million FSD drivers soon at some point this year. So you know, if it's a serious problem, 1 in 1 million is actually kind of a problem for Tesla, because it just takes that one issue, that one bad experience could go viral. So it's a tricky thing for them. I think they're handling it really well, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think, you need some more viral moments, because I'm still not like, as soon as I get out of like my Tesla YouTube world and I get into like a normal YouTube world, I'm not seeing any FSD videos. I'm not seeing anything. I'm not seeing FSD on the news. I'm not seeing FSD anywhere. And then as soon as I get back into my X world or get into, my Tesla YouTube world, then I see it all the time. So yeah, they've definitely got to get more viral moments and get more awareness of this.
Jeff, actually, I was kind of surprised that FSD did sort of make it in the news, and that when I was put on hold waiting to be able to get my control numbers from Schwab, they went through this rundown, and evidently there were 2 people at the Berkshire Hathaway thing that brought up whether the cyber cab was going to hurt insurance and Geico, and what the effect of that was going to be. Yeah, so I was kind of surprised. I nearly fell out of my chair when like Schwab was talking about that. Well, instead of the hold music. And do you want to kind of address that in a way? Because that was also a rather interesting point, that they were complaining on one hand, that's like, yeah, our insurance is going to go down. We're not going to be able to charge as much. There won't be as many accidents. And on the other hand, there's like, yeah, but EVs are really expensive to repair. So
yeah, and that when you use my comment on that, and from there's a whole like art and science and DFX world around repairability. There's a whole world around how to train for this, how to design this in, how to get the cost structure right. Because when you unfold unit economics and then you look at the cost of a lack of repairability, it's gigantic. It hits your warranty line. It hits remorse lines. It hits a number of different lines in unit economics. But yeah, that comment I think is very rear view facing. And I think Tesla, starting even with the Cybertruck and the later versions of the Y, they've really taken on and made some of these pieces modular, more easy to repair. You just look at that that mounting assembly for seats, going from dozens of welded parts to a casted part. And that's in the Cybertruck today. It's in the later versions of the Y. It's going to be in every car going forward. All these things are, just much greater levels of repairability and modularity. So, so I think Tesla's addressing the repairability thing. And just to say, like, just because it's an EV, I don't know where they're. I don't know where they're getting. I'd be interested to see some third-party information on this, by the way, too, because I find the whole thing. Like, I think a lot of this is coming from Hertz. And it looks to me from the outside looking in, like if I were to go, like if somebody brought me in and said, hey, we want you to go like piece apart this whole Hertz thing from top to bottom, like what happened? It seems to me like this thing was a clusterfuck from the Hertz side. It seems to me like there was like an edict from like on down, like go buy a bunch of EVs, like go hard on EV, and like go to, like, nobody had EVs except Tesla. And I know they have other EVs besides Tesla now, but at the time they bought a shit ton of Teslas at the highest price. And then the whole thing just started, spiraling out of control. They had a utilization problem. They didn't roll out charging the right. They didn't do a bunch of things the right way, and then they just started blaming EVs for like everything, which by definition started blaming Teslas. And then this whole, I'd love to see this data about repairability, because I would tell you that an S and X and probably the early 3s and early Ys probably, per $1,000 of cost in the vehicle, I'm sure their repair costs were probably pretty high. But I would say that was an issue they probably meaningfully impacted over the last couple of years. So I think that person on Buffett's team I think they're using some rear view data. I think looking ahead, it's not going to be an issue. And I think Tesla, just to wrap up this point, I think Tesla should be bundling insurance and FSD and getting, consumers buy both. It costs, consumers $100, $200, $300 a month, depending on the size of their family, for insurance or more. So if Tesla could find a way to bundle that together, I think they're going to get gigantic FSD adoption.
By the way, I pay $200 a month for minimum insurance on the Model 3 my daughter drives. And she drives very limited miles because she's a university student. She drives like, I don't know, 1 or 2 days a week and doesn't drive very far. So she's probably doing 5,000 miles a year. So the amount I'm spending on car insurance per mile is insane.
Yeah, and there's wide variation in that. Yeah, there's people spending. I've seen some of the people like quoting what there's wide variation in that. It depends too on like what's your cash position, what do you want, in terms of premium, what do you want to pay up front, and pretty wide variation.
Warren,
go ahead.
Is that Tesla insurance, Warren?
No, there's no Tesla insurance in Florida, goddammit. No, I don't know how many people you've heard this from, but you're getting, your insurance policy's up and the insurance company says, okay, and then they're hiking your insurance rates like 25%. In our case, I think the initial quote was going to work out to like $10,000 a year for car insurance. And I'm like, well, she's not going to have a car. I'm not paying $10,000 a year for car insurance for driving 5,000 miles a year. She can just take Uber. Because there's other costs. Just the car, that's $2 a mile just on the insurance. So I think we got it down to like 50 cents a mile on the insurance, which is still kind of high, So, but I want her in the safest car in the world, so I got her in a Model 3, But I think that the insurance hit is just killing everybody. And yes, shifting over to I love Jeff's point. Jeff, I think you had a post or maybe you messaged me or something about Buffett or Munger, whatever, whoever it was like thinking the Berkshire Hathaway guy was applying backwards data, data from the past and looking into the future instead of seeing your point. I think that was brilliantly stated.
Okay, before we move on to the next topic, we got Lord Purdy Flacco, previously Charity Trades, right? Did you want to join in the conversation?
Yeah, how's it going,
Good,
everyone?
thanks. What topic do you want to talk about? Stock?
Yeah, actually, so Warren brought up something that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about, which is the rate of improvement. I think a lot of people I hear on spaces like Tesla Live, they really analyze the current version. And in my opinion, that is almost like literally like useless to do. I think the most important thing is going to be, ever since 12.3, which was the game-changing version, the big question is going to be, what does 12.4 look like? Because if you're tracking the cadence between each of these kind of subversions, upgrades, I think I calculated, I have to pull it up, but I think it was something like, in the range of every 2 to 3 months at this point for version 12. That's going to be a really big indicator of where things are going. My suspicion, and this is something I've tweeted about quite a bit since, I would say like early April or something in particular, was like, what did Elon see, right? That is the big question.
Nice.
Because all of a sudden, right, towards the end of March, early April, we started to see a flurry of updates related to Robotaxi and FSD and green lighting a lot of these accelerated kind of timelines and pulling that forward. So one thing that I tweeted that he replied to was he confirmed ahead of the earnings call that they can see up to 4 or 5 months ahead of time in terms of the versions that he's seeing in testing, whether it's in simulation or from employees or what have, or even himself. He's able to see the data about 4+ months ahead of us. So, meaning, if we were to look at where were things towards I would say like the mid-March, late March timeframe that led him to be like, let's go. The time is now. We are ready. If you add that kind of 4 or 5 month timeline, that brings you all the way to August. And my calculations suggest that version 13 should be ready as early as August. So I don't know. I think that that's kind of really the big question for me. And so I think that within the next 2 weeks, I believe that they're going to release 12.4 to employees.
Wow, very interesting. That's an amazingly good point because he had made that decision, he's like you said, a few months ago, and then he can see 4 months out. So he might have already been seeing, they definitely had already seen 12.4 and 12.5. And then maybe you're even suggesting maybe, the next version 13 as well. Very interesting. Yep.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And that was I can share the tweet where I did a quick analysis just looking at all of the number of days between each release cycle.
Yeah, I've been showing that. I've been showing that. I don't know if you've been watching my shows, like almost like 5 shows. I keep putting that table back up again. It's so well done. I love it.
I've seen a couple of them, but I'll rewatch them just to get caught up. But yeah, I mean, I think that's of course, it's just a little bit of a data point, right, for us to kind of get a general sense. And so nothing's guaranteed and nothing is linear in software development. So we'll see where things actually land. But I found it interesting that if I just applied the averages, I came up with version 13 release date being August 8th. Which was odd coincidence.
Really?
Yeah. I'll post it to the top of this thread.
Yeah, please post that. If not, go to Lord's X channel or X account. So the interesting thing about what happened at the earnings call, right, wasn't it when you guys heard Ashok Alaswamy himself say that we have a dashboard of all the critical disengagements that are happening. And he kind of alluded that we know how long it takes to solve a particular engagement because they address it, they'll put in some videos. It takes a few weeks or a month for it to be able to, to train it, then another few weeks or months for them to check and QA on it. Then they move on to the next one. And because you can do that, because this is neural net, because they've got access to all the data now, because they don't have any more compute constraint, you can now calculate and go, okay, if this is the case, I've got 20 critical disengagements. I think that they'll all be solved by this date. That's what I think has given them so much confidence. You guys want to make a comment about Ashok's revelation, what he explained to people?
Yeah, this is coming from a software standpoint with sprints and iterative process. And I know some people don't know these terms, sprint or iterative, but basically, and I'll just use a weekly analogy. Every week, the team gets together and they choose which features are going to be included in the work they do that week, including testing and everything, and then shipping. So this is an iterative process that happens regularly. And then on top of that coding and testing process, there's also a release process, and the release schedule may be different, meaning there might be 2 or 3 sprints that happen before a release happens. And there is a period of time where you decide what's going to make it into the next release. And those thoughts are coming to my mind now as these comments are being mentioned.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think Emmett summarized it well. It's kind of an inside term of like based on like what kind of development deployment process you have for software pre-launch on a product. And I think am I getting it? Lord? Oh, I thought it was just Lord Flacco, not Lord Pretty Flacco. So I got to get my
Keeps
name
changing his
right.
name.
Okay, LPF. I think those points are super valid and super interesting. What did Elon see? And, how much faith, can we put in that trajectory? Because we're on a different paradigm now. We're not on a heuristic paradigm, code, debug, fix, break. You're on a different paradigm in terms of end to end. And so I think they've been able to put together a few data points. Like we're trying to put a few data points together, like looking at 12.3 and 12.3.1 and 12.3.3 and 4 and 6. They've already seen, the next several releases internally and decided, they system test them, they run them on simulators, and they can see data pretty quickly in terms of their rate of improvement and their rate of breakage and kind of the overall drive down in terms of performance. So my question for them would be, is like, what kind of, tell me the life of a problem. Like a problem comes in and tell me the stages it goes through and how long it takes from the time a problem comes in to the time it's released onto a production vehicle, and what that timeline looks like. What does it look like on V12 versus V11? And how do you see that timeline changing? And then I think you can do some really interesting interpolations about where this is going. But that is it. That is the question. What did Elon see? Why did all this kick in the motion? Just this flurry of changing the pricing, the free trial, the rapid releases. Like what happened? And how does all this tie together? So the 12, I think I agree. I think the 12.4 release is going to be a huge data point. And would also be another huge data point. Will Tesla start releasing incrementally some information, about the performance, and how many people are now using. I think there's two interesting data points. One is how many people are signed up and using FSD beta now versus before, and per user, what's the utilization rate? Like what percent of the driving miles are people doing? I think those two together are huge quality metrics. And I think they're going to, because I'll tell you this, my personal experience on V11, I was probably using FSD 20% of the time. And now I'm probably using it greater than 80% of the time. So that, I think those two quality metrics together are critical.
Yeah, I was 5% of the time. Now I'm at 90% of the time. Lord?
And what just a friend who just ordered her Tesla, she should be taking delivery today or tomorrow. And she's been nothing but excited about FSD because the rep showed it to her. And every time she gets in, we had a demo car overnight. And every time we got in the demo car, she was driving it with FSD. She was just so excited about it. And that was like mind blowing for me, because she's got a couple friends that have Teslas, but she isn't like a hardcore Tesla person by any means. And she was just titillated as can be about FSD.
Go ahead, Lord.
Hey, sorry. I actually wasn't able to hear anyone talk for a while. I'm not sure if I'm going to be changing the subject, but I was going to bring up something else related to
Go ahead.
robotaxis, but
Nope.
I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to ask everyone what their thoughts are on potential government interventions when it comes to robotaxis. Just to give a little context, the main thing that I'm actually worried about as it pertains to Tesla's robotaxi business is not so much competition. Actually, I don't even believe that there's going to be any for the first 5-10 years, but more so about government interventions. So think, for example, fleet caps, per ride fees, things in the name of trying to save jobs, trying to, or for jurisdictions that maybe are a little bit more conservative or risk averse to innovation and so forth, and their potential to change the economics, to make more of a leveled playing field, I should say, for existing kind of human-based drivers and taxis. So I want to see if anyone has thought through that piece, because we saw a lot of that with Uber, when they were first launching various cities. And then we also saw that with the scooter kind of industry, the electric scooter, electric bikes, where local jurisdictions would place fleet caps in order to kind of create a more competitive environment and enable other kind of providers to be able to compete.
So I think about this topic a lot. One thing people may not be aware of and should be aware of is the state of Florida in, I think, 2019 adopted a law. I think there was a recent modification that made things even better, but the law was that self-driving cars are legal, robo-taxis are legal, and local governments have are preempted. They're not allowed to regulate or tax self-driving cars or robo-taxi fleets. So any regulation would have to come at the state level. I think several states adopted similar legislation to Florida. Um, and I think that there's a danger that some countries would resist the spread of robotaxi. India, for example, at least parts of India are notorious for what are called taxi mafias, where it's not government action. It's literally like the people who run the taxis will destroy your car if you're trying to run it as a human driver. If you're trying to provide taxi services without being part of the mafia, then you're just going to get run out. But I think an important thing to understand that I think a lot of people don't see yet is robo-taxis will be in wealthy countries first. They will not spread to poor countries for years because the price of a ride and the profit generated from a robo-taxi running in the United States or Western Europe or Canada, Australia, New Zealand, et cetera, the wealthy countries, where the price of an Uber ride is somewhere around $2 to $3 a mile, you'll be able to sell rides for $1 a mile for 10 years before you're going to get but the price of a ride here in Thailand is 60 cents a mile. So why would you run a robo-taxi in Thailand or India when you can make more money running a robo-taxi in the United States? I think we'll see it spread in China, and China's not going to stop it. China is going to encourage it. So there are there are countries that are like, hey, progress, let's do it, which is China and Florida and Texas and Nevada. And then there are countries and states that are like, oh, progress, let's get in the way and stop it as quickly as possible. But fortunately, the states that are pro growth are more than half the US population, and China is a bigger market than the United States. So I think we're going to see the spread of robotaxi in friendly places first. And then anybody who tries to get in the way is going to be obviously screwing their own people, which it will happen. But the size of the market in the United States and at least half the United States and China is so large that you're talking 5 years before you spread enough to the places that are friendly, that the places that are less friendly matter. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, that helps a lot. I actually totally agree with you on that as well. I'm actually on the what I'm trying to get a sense of is maybe what are maybe the first 20 markets that are most likely to kind of like enable a robotaxi fleet outside of the ones that are currently live with Waymo and Cruise. Those will be easy to launch. I understand that. But when I go to this website called National Conference of State Legislatures, NCSL, they have here basically all of the state and major city regulations. And one thing it says, for example, is that 29 states have enacted legislation related to autonomous vehicles. And so I think you said, so maybe I'll take a look at maybe what Florida has. I think you said Florida specifically. Was there any other states or places that you suspect might be the easiest
Sure.
or most friendliest?
I think California and Arizona have existing robo-taxi operations, and I think California is letting it spread. And I haven't seen any indication that California is gonna try to save Uber drivers' jobs. I mean, California's been crapping on, and Cliff came up. Cliff is an Uber driver, but some states, I think it's California and maybe Minnesota, are just crapping on Uber drivers with their, making them mandatory employees, and then, the companies can't operate. So there will be states that will try to resist, but if you ban automation and raise minimum, if you if you try to restrict freelancers and you raise minimum wage, then you just make robots all the more competitive. So I think California, Texas, and Florida are the 3 largest states in the country. And then Arizona is a big state, and you probably have 5 to 10 other states that are at least 5 to 10 other states that are going to be supportive of EVs. I'm guessing, we've got 50 states, so I don't think it's unreasonable to say we'll have 5 or 10 more. And I think that's going to be half the U.S. population, and that's such a big market. When you combine that with China, which is such a big market, that it's going to take 5 to 10 years to build enough robotaxis to get to the places that are resistant.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and those are great points. So kind of we have California, Arizona, Florida, Texas that are probably the easy yeses. New York maybe as well, maybe not. But one thing that's interesting about I think what you brought up kind of towards the end is that there's sort of there's a little bit of a power law distribution when it pertains to kind of the market size of ride hailing. I remember coming across a couple interesting statistics for Uber, for example, one of which was that 25% of global rides originate from 5 markets: New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, London, and Sao Paulo. And 57% of their global revenues come from North America alone, which I guess makes a little bit more sense. And given the fact that there's about 1 to 2 million Uber drivers in North America, and about 200,000 in California, one thing I'm trying to get to is, given these friendly states, right, or the ones that we believe are probably the most likely to be friendly and maybe early adopters, quote unquote, what might be the capacity for the supply side? Because, people like Gary Black love to say, hey, look, there's only 2 million Uber drivers. So guess what? The most you can have is 2 million robotaxis. Well, that's clearly false, because as price drops, the TAM multiplies. It's not a linear relationship. It's a geometric relationship. So Uber themselves in the Investor Day 2023, I think, they had an interesting slide. It basically showed this graph where on the x-axis it showed price. And as price decreased from $2 to $1, they estimated that the TAM multiplies by 25x. So, kind of using that as some basis, right? I think we can conservatively say that the capacity for robotaxis is somewhere in the order of 10x, the current. So if Uber has something to the tune of 2 million in the US specifically, then perhaps it would be fair to say that 20 million could be the capacity for the United States alone.
We have an Uber driver on the panel. Cliff, did you have any comments about all this?
Yes, actually I have, oh my God, there's so many different points that I wanted to touch on, but I want to just focus on the Robotaxi. The first thing I want to say is I know that a lot of you guys don't think Tesla needs Uber, and in the long term, I agree 100%. But the point I think we can agree on is that one of the limitations that Tesla currently has is data. Finding certain pieces of data. So, like, let's say, for instance, some certain edge cases that they need, and other parts of it is going to be like if you're going to be having a full-on robotaxi that lasts 150 feet to the destination, Tesla doesn't have that data. And the people who have that data are the people that drive every single day, dropping people off at Uber drivers, rideshare drivers, taxi drivers. So that's the first thing that I wanted to bring up. For that reason alone, I think it's worth it for Tesla to work with these different rideshare companies to provide, work with these different rideshare companies. A couple of other things I wanted to bring up.
Wait, before you go on, what's
Sure.
the last 150 feet of data? What's in there that we don't understand?
Sure. So, like, let's say, for instance, I'm dropping somebody off at a building, or like basically like where to pull over, how to pull over, those kinds of.
Yeah, Cliff, keep going on. You just unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry. No. So what I was mentioning is with regards to the last 150 feet is basically like, what's a safe place to drop off? What's a safe place to pick up? Those kinds of things. Like Tesla doesn't really have those kinds of pieces of data in their data, as far as I can tell, because they don't have rideshare drivers doing that kind of work. They don't have very many. I don't think. So they don't have, where do I pick up people? Where do I drop them off? And how is that safe? The other part is Tesla is building a pretty large inventory of cars right now because they've already reached the early adopters and they got to get on to the next phase, which is like the general public. And right now, there's a bunch of Uber drivers who would love to get their hands on Teslas, and they're renting them from not because they want to, from Hertz, because that's one of the few places where they can rent them. And Tesla last year rolled out a rental service, but only in Texas. And I don't see why they wouldn't want to expand that with their existing inventory. One, they can collect the data from the drivers, and two, they'll be earning income on cars that are currently sitting on their lot, used cars, not even the new ones, used cars. So it's a pretty big opportunity for them to actually do that. The other part is Uber drivers are one of the biggest sales force for Tesla. You have no idea how many times. I'll say let's say out of 30 rides in a day, at least 20 of those rides, people are going to be asking me questions about the car. They're going to be commenting about the car, etc. And it's a hidden sales force that Tesla has that they don't even know that they have. So and the other part is as if, let's say for instance, once Tesla solves the Robotaxi issue, they will already have an existing, like a much larger fleet of Uber drivers who had already been driving their cars, ready to deploy the cars into the Tesla fleet. So there's many. I just find like there's several reasons why I think it actually makes sense for Tesla to work with, again, not just necessarily Uber. I say Uber because that's who I deal with primarily, but pretty much all the rideshare companies.
I know, Herbert, we're going to move on to the next topic, but Cliff, great comment. And if you watch the Cyber Bulls show, I'm in your corner. I've been actually, to Herbert's chagrin, talking about the fact that in the near term or short term, Tesla may do a partnership with Uber, but in the long term, they probably don't need it. But I mean, what do you think about the fact that Tesla's building a rideshare app where I believe they're going to start using the app with, basically you could become a Tesla rideshare driver before, robotaxis are here. What do you think about Tesla acquiring that data organically with their own app? And if you're talking, I can't hear you. Can others hear Cliff?
No, I
No.
couldn't hear him, and I got a DM that
Okay.
Lord
let's
couldn't hear
move
him
on.
either.
Let's move on to
Okay.
the next topic here, which is Tom Zhu, right? He's reportedly going back to Tesla China. He's going to resume his role as just in charge of China. He recently was promoted to include Europe and be US, North America, to be global. He's the senior vice president of automotive. And obviously he was just a major player in expanding China, helping expand China. Why is he going back? Is it because the potential launch of Robotaxi in China? Is it because of the Model Y refresh? Is it because of the new low-cost vehicles that are happening? What are thoughts from the group here? Why don't we start with you, Warren? I haven't heard your opinion on this.
Well, I did my poll, and the answer was dim sum.
What?
And dim sum had a majority, had a rare majority vote.
I guess
But
if you're saying that he's missing his family, he's missing China, being there, living there, like that.
No, I'm joking, but I think that the number one thing that's going to happen in China is the rollout of FSD, and I think my guess is that Tom Zhu, of course they're going to have manufacturing stuff going on, and they're going to probably be building, new vehicles. They've talked about bringing forward vehicles on lines that are underutilized, and maybe Shanghai has underutilized lines, or they can squeeze capacity out of what they have. So that's part of it. But I think managing the rollout of FSD in China is going to be super important. And I think he's, Elon's most trusted lieutenant right now with Drew and Zach gone, who's left, so put him in charge of the biggest market.
Yeah, what he's returning to is much bigger than what he left. He's got to, like Warren said, he's got to do FSD rollout. I believe Tesla's fastest path to production, they dropped in these new vehicles, these interim vehicles before the next platform. And Tesla's fastest path to production would be to get them ramped up in Shanghai They've got over 95% of the supply base localized, and network latency is everything in development timelines, and it's everything in supply chain management. And if Elon wants to get these things into production by the end of the year, or worst case, early part of next year, his only chance would be to get him going in Shanghai first. By the way, like, I didn't really get the, I'm head of marketing, I'm head of sales. Like, I didn't really get that. Like, in the US, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I have great respect for Tom, by the way. I think he's highly capable in many areas, but I mean, you have to look back, like, he started building factories, and it's pretty clear, like, the work he did in Shanghai, like, he's good at this. Like, he's good at speed, he's good at schedule, he's good at, fit for purpose and getting these things built out, probably at the right cost structure. That is an unbelievable skill. You will be employed for life. It's amazing. Then he taught himself car assembly, mass and mass production, at the system level. So logically, where people normally move from there is they kind of move up in the supply chain and get into component management and get into, full on supply chain management. And here he comes to the US, he's got to get Texas ramped. He's got to get, Model 3 ramped in the US. He's got to get Cybertruck going. And then, oh, by the way, let's drop sales. And oh, by the way, let's drop marketing in. And I think there may have been too much going on there. And he's returning back to China. It's a much bigger job, rolling out with FSD, and the competition is much more fierce. And I do think he's going to be the first to build these vehicles. So he's returning back to a boatload of work. All right. Should we go to a hand, Herbert, or what do you think?
Yeah, let's go to X.
Hi, good afternoon, y'all. Herbert, Jeff, Xander, good afternoon.
Hi.
Thank you for the alpha, Warren. I'm here to remind everybody about the debate from Dan O'Dowd on the 29th of April. There's going to be a rematch. So if you guys could all go and reserve a spot for that, it'll be May 11th. And that will be hosted by our Adrian Dittman. It'll be a rematch, and I think that there's only going to be a limited speaker panel. But if you guys have a question, that would be a great time to put it out, because he is the biggest FUD raiser of Tesla. So we do want to put him on the spot publicly so that he can stop spreading the FUD, because we all know that Tesla is a very successful company. And thank you guys for letting me speak. I didn't really have much to say other than that.
Yeah, the speakers will be Adrian, Metaphor, and myself, along with Dan. And I don't think we should expect to persuade him. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. I have hopes, but I think the secret is that you have a conversation, and there's people listening, and there's some people on one side, and there's some people on the other, and a lot of people aren't going to change their view. But there's some people who have a view, but it's not strongly held, and there's some people who are in the middle. And your goal isn't to persuade the guy you're arguing with. The goal is to see if you can shift the audience in your favor. And also, I suppose we can concede the possibility he might be right, or he might have some opinions that we don't fully understand yet. And we can try to get a better understanding of his perspective, and we can try to be less wrong. It's possible. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible.
Yeah, I think it's the right approach. In general, I've found it helpful to also stay on a topic and close it before you go to the next one, because some of these professional distortion field people like to literally, go into run-on sentences and change the topic 4 times and never close out on an issue. So
Gordon is great at that. The moment he starts to lose, he'll switch topics.
yeah. He's got cue cards in front of him, because I've been on 3 spaces with him where he's brought up the Tesla used unqualified components during the pandemic, and I'm like, I developed qualification procedures in consumer electronics actually, and in auto modules when we were making I'm like, this is totally up to the company, and anyway, but yeah, he reads off of cue cards, but that's less interesting. Herbert, what else do we got in terms of agenda?
Herbert's at dinner.
Nope,
You're in
I'm
charge.
about to leave, so I think we're done. Thank you guys
Dinner.
very much for attending us. We'll just please join us. Please follow the Cyberbulls account that you'll see there. We'll do this once a week as we have been at the same time. Thanks, everybody. Thank you,
Follow
Warren and
speaker
Scott.
and Lord
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you, Herbert.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.